Good evening, everyone. Anchorpete here, and I'm with my good friend Brian, Mr. Coors Hair. How you doing, Brian?
Doing great, Pete.
Dude, everything is back to the way it should be. It's you and me at night talking about a Marvel show on Disney Plus.
It is fantastic to be back live. We've done this a few times since then, but it's all pre-recorded. But I like this kind of day of live discussion so much better than the pre-recorded stuff.
Yes. And I am crossing my fingers and hoping it's not like the last recording I did with Danny, where like literally I would say my line and then Danny would go to talk and then it would freeze. And then I'd say my line and then Danny would go to talk and it would freeze. It was pretty rough, man.
Oh God, I hope that doesn't happen.
Yes, that's why I'm in my kitchen. I haven't been in my kitchen in a while, but I'm in my kitchen for tonight's episode. So anyway, Brian, have you gone ahead and got your LOKI Lucky Charms yet?
Oh, I forgot. I found out about that yesterday, and I made a point to come back and do it this morning. I forgot. I remembered around lunchtime, but forgot again because I was busy at work, and now I completely forgot again. So I'm assuming I missed out on it at this point.
Yeah, they probably got all snatched up. If you guys are wondering what the heck we're talking about, there is actually like this like limited edition LOKI Lucky Charms cereal, like where they've made like a box with LOKI on it, and you have to special order it though, right?
Yes, you had the special order from a website. Maybe I should just check it right now and make sure I'm not out of luck. But if maybe I get lucky, who knows?
Oh, Lucky Charms. There you go. Well, I can tell you someone who is lucky. It is LOKI. Let me see if I can say his last name the right way. Lofferson? How do you say his last name? Lofferson. Okay. So this LOKI is lucky, and he touches the Tesseract and is able to save himself.
Yes, that is the basic setup of the show. And one of the things I found very interesting about it, and maybe this is jumping too far in to the episode already, but yeah. What LOKI did was completely natural to who he is. Like he saw an opportunity and he seized it. But according to the TVA, the Time Variance Authority, who we didn't know who that was when we first heard about this when the trailer dropped,
right?
They deemed his actions wrong, and then to be corrected. I find that so interesting that this faceless sort of bureaucracy is more about adhering to a specific preset destiny in a sense than any kind of morality or actual right and wrong.
Yeah, and they make a point of that right in that first episode. Owen Wilson says that like it's not really a matter of, what do you say? Like it's not a matter of like deserving, I think he said, right?
Yeah.
And so they don't care about good versus evil. They just care about like this sort of timeline and just maintaining that timeline. So I think that right there is kind of probably what the crux of our conversation is going to be about. Because I was going to ask you about that. Are they implying that there is just one Marvel timeline and that's it?
Okay, so this is where it gets interesting, because I was really thinking about the Timekeepers, and maybe we should do a quick little info dump about the Timekeepers.
Go ahead.
So they were created in the late 70s by Mark Grunwald, who was a writer for Marvel and did a few various other things there. Yeah. They were created by a character called He Who Remains, and these are actually all Thor characters. They were all created in Thors at various points in the late 60s or 70s, and the members of the TVA are all supposed to kind of look similar, and they all take on an appearance of actually modeled after Mark Grunwald, who created the Timekeepers, which I found very interesting. Although in this show, it seems like only Mobius or Owen Wilson is taking on that appearance.
Yeah. Okay. So there's that one scene where there's like a mural on the wall, right? When LOKI has to have like a ticket. I thought that was Stan Lee. But that's Mark Grunwald then?
I believe so, yes.
Okay.
Which is interesting.
Yeah.
So the Timekeepers have power over time, and it's just such a weird thing, and it's kind of jarring in a sense with all the other stuff that we're used to, all the other cosmic powers and entities we're used to hearing about in the Marvel Universe. I have to say this is more of a deep cut to me. This was not they've made appearances in the 80s, but I don't really think they have been mentioned really since then. It's, and what really got me thinking about was, what really is the difference between the timekeepers and like the watchers?
Mm-hmm.
And like, you know, I hear the word multiverse, and I always think more different realities. But I mean, it certainly could mean different timelines. But I mean, are they saying that a different timeline is a different reality, or are those two words interchangeable? And that's kind of what I couldn't really figure out.
Huh. Oh Jesus, man, we are gonna get like real deep with our friggin' nerd talk tonight. You know, we're just gonna like turn so many people off. It's gonna be like 3 views altogether. But I don't give a shit because this is what I want to talk about. Dude, that one question right there, like, let's just unpack that shit right there. Like, there's tons and tons of time travel in comics and all the comics related shit that we watch. And they sometimes have the idea that, like, if you go back in time, you can change something and it's going to change the future. Then there's the idea that you go back in time, you change something, and you create an alternate timeline, which this is certainly referencing. In Marvel, in the Marvel comics, and I know you know all this, I'm just saying this to our watchers, is that, you know, there's the 616 reality. That's the main Marvel universe. And then there's all these other realities. So I think the question that you're saying is, like, are they all offshoots of the main Marvel universe, or are they like just already made timelines or realities that are parallel to that one?
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. So like, are the different numbered realities offshoots of a single timeline? And just in general, like, what does that mean for the What If show? What does that mean for Multiverse of Madness?
Right.
I mean, does that mean is it a blunder? Is it a plot hole? Does it mean maybe the TVA will be dissolved by the end of the show? And it's a free for all, and that's how we're getting these other shows? Or is there something else?
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad we're talking about this, because this is the exact shit I was thinking about when we were watching the show too. Because, like, okay, the TVA is based on these 3 guys, right? The 3 statues that we see multiple times in this episode, right? And Loki at one point refers to them as lizards, right? He's like, alien lizards. I had to make sure, because I looked at the caption, it said lizards and not wizards, right? And so is that the implication that, like, they're not wearing masks? Because they look a lot like Kang, right?
Well, yeah, in the comics they do kind of have these green looking faces. I mean, that little animated sequence, they look to be sort of alien looking, you know, not totally human. And I would think they actually do like that, because it seems to me like they are a cosmic entity on par with, you know, the Ego and Eon and the Living Tribunal and all those kind of things.
Yeah, like super
eternity.
Yeah, like way more powerful than even like Thanos or anything that we've seen so far.
Correct, but it's just weird that, like, I know all those other things, but but you know, prior to this show, like, I didn't know about this at all, and it's just it's so interesting to have like a comic continuity that's spanned decades and decades and decades, where all these ideas are on there, and you kind of have to like move things around to make it all make sense, even though you really can't probably.
Right. Well, let me ask you this, like, because one of our favorite comics is Exiles, right? This like sort of X-Men multiverse kind of comic, right? What were the name of those like bug guys that were watching all the realities? Do you remember?
That is a great question.
Were they like caretakers or something, or I
want to say keepers, but I think that's Mass Effect.
Oh, okay. Yeah. But they are not the same thing as this.
You know what? What was that construct that was the original like point of contact for them that gave them the Talus? What was that guy even called? Was he called the Timekeeper?
I think he had Keeper in his name, man, but I don't think it was time, because it was all about other realities.
Yeah.
They didn't have any kind of reference to time. But yeah, guys, that comic Exiles, it's one of mine and Brian's favorite comics. It's really good. It's all about different versions of the characters, different realities, you know? And so, like, just to kind of tie it back to what we're talking about, it looks like they're building this up to where there was multiple timelines to begin with, and then they condensed it into one, which that's a very DC kind of thing, right?
Yeah, that kind of makes me sad. I mean, I love seeing these different realities and seeing like these what ifs, and differences. It's just fun. It's like, oh, what if this person died? Like, who steps up and takes their place, or just people in different circumstances. I always find it interesting, no matter what intellectual property we're talking about. So when DC did that, it was like, and then Marvel sort of tried to do it too. They both had, DC had what was the DC
Crisis on Infinite Earths?
No, it was like one of that was like the original one, but like the more recent one, it was a little more Brainiac focused, I think.
Convergence.
Convergence, yeah. So they had Convergence, and then Marvel had Secret Wars?
Secret Wars, yeah.
With the whole Doctor Doom and Battle World, all that. I mean, it was basically the same thing, just trying to whittle it down to one existing timeline, and they had some decent ideas with there. But I mean, there's so much out there, and it's so much fun to have these other different realities, and especially since we're such fans of Exiles too. It's like it invalidates that in a sense, and this always rubs me the wrong way.
Well, what I think is kind of going along with what you were saying before is that I think that they're going to like dissolve that TVA, that organization. I think that that's going to get destroyed, or like they're going to change, and that like this show is kind of like the catalyst for there being multiple realities.
I'm hoping so. And my favorite question that I always think about and ask you is like, where does this go? What does this lead into? What is this setting up for us? And you just answered it right there, probably.
Yeah, I think that the events of Endgame were like a major thing that just had this ripple effect, right? And now this show is just like the next thing. It's like the butterfly effect, right? It's like this, and then this is going to lead to the next thing. And probably the stuff with like Scarlet Witch, that probably had something that has something to do with it too.
Fun little anecdote. The TVA was involved in a storyline where the Scarlet Witch was deemed too powerful of a being, and they sent Immortus, who was also Kang the Conqueror, a version of Kang the Conqueror, to ensure that she did not have children.
Oh, really?
And this somehow leads into the relationship between Scarlet Witch and Vision, which I found very interesting, considering that the first show we got out of these Marvel TV shows was WandaVision.
Yeah. Well, dude, that's okay. Well, see, that goes along with a little tidbit and my wife is telling me to get goldfish from my daughter. There you go. I just threw goldfish. Hopefully the bag didn't open up. But that, it's all live, But I was going to say that one tidbit that I found doing the research, because, dude, you did some deep dive in research for this shit tonight, is that the guy that is like the showrunner for this show, his name is Michael Weldrum, and he actually is one of the writers on Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. And we know that Wanda's in that, right?
Yeah, okay. So there's definitely some interconnectivity there.
Yeah. And like when you go to his page, I think that you might be into him too, man, because first of all, he's a writer on Rick and Morty. And then he's also he worked on Community too. So,
God. Okay. Yeah. I'm all in now.
And like Harmon Quest, right? I think that was like some sort of Dan Harmon D&D thing.
D&D thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I didn't watch that as much, but I mean, I'm like, Community is one of my all-time favorite shows. I love Rick and Morty too. So that's great to hear. Yeah.
And this show definitely felt like Rick and Morty in some regard. Don't you think?
Yeah. There's kind of like a time Citadel, which is kind of comparison to the Citadel of Rick's. Yeah, I can see that.
I mean, Rick and Morty, and then like maybe like Doctor Who, and like the only other example I can think of, you're gonna get mad at me for this, but like Jupiter Ascending, right? They all kind of have this sort of like absurdity, like where it's like they're trying to like make a bureaucratic group, but it's like all this weird alien shit. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And that's what this kind of reminded me of too. There's all this weird shit going on. Like there's a robot that like zaps his clothes off at one point. That like little person comes out and he says like, if you're a robot, you're going to melt from the inside. Remember that? So it kind of reminds me. I don't know if you ever read like The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, but it kind of has that kind of feeling too.
I have not read it, but I saw the movie, I guess. So
yeah.
You're right. Definitely right about the absurdity of it. Yes.
Yeah, but what I was going to say was this guy who's the showrunner. it has him listed as working in the post-production of Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. So I think that like they're really trying to like just tie it all together, and whatever Loki does here is going to lead into that. Like I would not be surprised if like the end credit scene that we see for this maybe has Doctor Strange in it or has like Wanda in it, and it's just alluding to that movie, you know?
Yeah, it would be interesting if they're just, I mean, we thought that the unifying factor of all these shows was going to be introducing members of the Young Avengers, but I mean, maybe it's really all actually. Well, I guess Falcon and Winter Soldier didn't have anything to do with this, but it's interesting that these two shows may be influencing the same thing.
Yeah, well, dude, I mean, you just gave me like a little nerd boner just now because you brought up the Young Avengers thing, and it's like. Maybe we will, though, because there's another fucking Loki on this show, right?
That is correct. So before we get into that, actually, I want to bring up one little Easter egg that I'm sure you noticed, too, that in the scene in France, they're looking at a stained glass and it says it looks like the devil. They're talking to the little French boy, and he says, the devil did it.
That's right.
The devil did this. I really wondered if that was a response to, everyone, us included, being like, it's Mephisto, and Mephisto's going to come up in WandaVision.
Yes.
I don't know if the timing really works out based on the production lengths of these shows.
Right.
It's really only a few months after that show. So, like, this episode had to have been filmed by the time that show was airing,
Yeah, well, let me ask you this. So, like, what the hell is up with that? Like, why is it like a devil in the stained glass? Is that just Loki being like kind of like a prick?
Possibly. That's kind of what I'm thinking. Because I mean, clearly the villain of this show is going to be another version of Loki, and I'm assuming that's going to be the female version of Loki.
Right. That's right.
And which also leads me into something that I saw popping up all over the internet. About on Loki's file, it mentions his sex. It says gender fluid.
Oh,
and, which I understand why it was like trending and people were talking about it. It's kind of like that's a huge thing to have that's a term like that given such a spotlight and and prominence in a major media production.
Yeah.
But I mean, I hope no one gets disappointed by the fact that how literal it is.
Yeah.
It doesn't really line up with the real world definition of gender fluidity. But so I mean, that it's making me believe that we were absolutely going to see a female Loki as the villain in this show.
Yeah. Well, I mean, since we're just like doing such deep cuts and stuff, and we're just like kind of talking about like real, like not plot stuff, but just like philosophical stuff. Like Loki himself, right? He's actually a frost giant, right? Because he's the son of a frost giant, right?
Correct.
So, like, did they make him look like an Asgardian, like using magic, or is he like a changeling? Like, how the hell? Why does he look like an Asgardian?
They touch upon this in the first Thor movie. It's been a while since I've watched that. I really do need to go back and rewatch it.
Yeah.
There's a point where they show him with blue skin, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
Is that some Asgardian magic or because he was a baby, he was blue. Absolutely. Yeah. And even in the fake play in Thor Ragnarok, they show a little blue boy or something.
Yeah. That's right.
That's a great question. Is the what is keeping him in that appearance? I mean, is it himself? Is that how he thinks he should appear? And that's the reasoning behind him being gender fluid. Maybe.
Okay, well here's a little plot hole, and this is for Danny too, by the way, because Danny wrote this whole big thing when I tweeted this out. He was like, "Oh, is this the first Marvel plot hole?" But here's a plot hole then, right? Because they say that magic doesn't work in the TVA Citadel, right? And so if magic doesn't work, shouldn't he be like a little blue boy?
That's a really good point. So
take that, Marvel.
We need to figure out. Marvel, tell Kevin Feige. Why is Loki not blue?
Oh man, what has my life become? Where I'm like, I'm almost 39 years old. I'm like, I got them. He's supposed to be blue.
I got you, Marvel. Where's my hush money?
Oh man! Like,
to jump into another completely unrelated Easter egg in this show, I didn't know anything about it going into it, but the inclusion of the DB Cooper little scene there, I didn't know that was the thing, and I was seeing the trailers in the show. I thought this was going to inform what Loki was actually going to be doing during the show.
yeah.
And, but it was a nice, after I read about it, it's a nice little Easter egg to take a real world event that was an unsolved mystery. So this guy, Dan Cooper, who was somehow mistakenly called DB Cooper by the media, he hijacked a plane, demanded a ransom, got it, and then took 4 parachutes and jumped out of a plane, never to be found again.
Yeah.
And investigations went on this for decades. And it was kind of like a funny little thing that it was Loki, and then the reason nobody found him was that it was the Bifrost, picked him up.
Yeah, I love that little scene. I kind of do feel like that was just thrown in there to have kind of like a little bit of an action beat, because the episode is so like exposition heavy. That's what Danny was saying in the tweet, was that it's like very exposition heavy, and like I think they just kind of needed to have like a little fun, exciting moment. But I do like the idea of like that he's this historical figure or this sort of like urban legend figure, because you kind of never think, oh yeah, these guys have been around for like hundreds of years, if not more.
Yeah.
So no, he was good. He was nice and charming, and that's he looks like a secret agent in that scene, and so that's why I think, like you said, it's kind of misleading in the trailer.
Yeah, it was absolutely misleading, and I think that the other interesting thing is that in all the trailers we've seen for this, I don't think we've seen any footage from anything besides this episode. Like, I mean, I have no inkling of what they're going to actually show based on the footage we've seen in the trailers coming up, and that's really exciting to me, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, ditto. There has been other stuff that they've shown. There is a thing. There's this picture that we see often when we like just Google this show, where he's got the horns and he's going like this, and it like he's got like some warriors around him, right?
Okay.
And if you look at that image, I think it says like "Vote Loki" and stuff on some of their shirts too, like as if he's like running for office.
Okay.
See,
so maybe
like
a campaign to rule the TVA.
Yeah. That could be it. I mean, and this is just like a little tangent too. I mean, it's interesting how much shit you can actually talk about with this show. But like Guardians of the Galaxy and Loki, the character, when you look at them in the comics, in the modern comics, so many people have very different interpretations of them. And so like every time you have a different writer, it's like a totally different book, right? Yeah. I bring up Guardians of the Galaxy and this because like the Guardians really got popular with the movies, right? And Loki has gotten way popular since he's in the MCU. And we've already talked about it, but there was female Loki that was sort of like a bad guy that was with the other Marvel villains. Then there was Kid Loki, who had his own series, and then he got older and he joined the Young Avengers, which we've referenced many times. Al Ewing, who's written, he's one of my favorite Marvel writers. He's written Guardians of the Galaxy recently too. He had like Loki, Agent of Asgard, where he's almost like a James Bond. And then there was a Loki story recently too, where he was like running for like president or something. And that was, I think, before Agent of Asgard. But you get all these different versions of Loki. And I think this show is going to have a few of those versions.
Interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah. I 100% do think we are getting female Loki, and that's the bad one. And then with that, like, vote for Loki, that's the Loki for president thing. I would not.
I mean, maybe the DB Cooper thing was the little glimpse of Agent of Asgard.
That's what I'm saying. Maybe it is a little bit of that. And I would not be surprised if, like, the last version we see of Loki is, like, a young teenage Loki to be on the Young Avengers.
That would be an interesting way to cap the show and cap Tom Hiddleston off as the character. I'm sure that a lot of these actors have been in these movies for 10 years, and he's one of the longest standing alumni here at this point.
Right.
So, I mean, I'm sure he wants to hang it up or take a break maybe. And, maybe we'll see that here.
Yeah. So I'm just trying to think, because there's so much to cover with this show.
So before you mentioned exposition. So I felt this episode of the show was two things. It was exposition and character motivation for Loki.
Hell yeah.
And we didn't really talk about any of that yet. So I mean, the whole episode really is Loki being presented with this situation where he's being told, which I touched upon before, he's being told that something that came naturally to him, which was seizing an opportunity to escape imprisonment, was wrong. And he can't comprehend that. He is a god. He cannot comprehend that. And then on top of that, he is, he's shown his future. He's told that there's a one timeline, and he's destined to do all these things. And he's shown his future where he kills his mother, he sees his father die, and then finally sees himself die.
Right.
And this is like, and on top of that, he's trying to get back to the Tesseract because they took it away from him, and he just finds it in like a drawer with all these other Infinity Stones, like totally trivializing their power.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is like a clear recipe for how you give a god an existential crisis, which I think is fascinating.
Yes.
And I loved, and that was my favorite thing about this episode was Loki's the development of his motivation for this show. He was in the beginning, he was all pumped up, and he was, I'm a god, you can't do this to me. And then by the end, he's like, I'm a god, you can do this to me. It was fantastic, and I'm very excited to see where it goes from here.
Yeah, that's very, very well put. That's very well put. Almost like it could almost be a arc of a comic book or a miniseries just in this one episode with what happens.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It whoever wrote this, because actually the guy who is the showrunner, Michael Waldron, or Weldron, he's the one that wrote this episode, and you could tell that he has like clearly watched all the Loki scenes in all the MCU movies. I mean, they show a lot of them in this episode too. It was almost like a clip show in that regard. But it's done so effectively where you really, I mean, first of all, Owen Wilson is literally asking him, "What is your motivation?" And then he's asking him, "Do you enjoy hurting people?" And that brings up this whole point that people, when you go into like chat rooms, you look on threads or whatever, people always talk about how Loki's pretty sinister in the Avengers movie, but then he's kind of, more noble or not as cruel in the other movies. And a lot of people say that that's because he was under the influence of the, I think the mind gem that's in his scepter.
Yes, I think
staff. Yeah. And then like Thanos was kind of manipulating him or something like that. So I feel like this episode kind of addressed that directly, because he even says that he has to hurt people to have this persona of the villain. And the villain is a construct. I think he says something along the lines of, he compared the whole place, the TVA organization, to a construct where it like...
where it's a cover for him being a coward.
Where, what's that?
Where it's a cover for him being a powerless coward or something like that.
Yeah. It's like to instill fear in others. Right. So yeah, just great character stuff, and just great just talking about concepts and philosophizing. I was eating that shit up, man.
I really had a blast watching the show. I'm really looking forward to seeing where they go with it.
Yeah. Well, there was a couple other things too, like throughout the course. You brought up probably my favorite part, my absolute favorite part, was when he's in that drawer and there's just Infinity Stones. And the guy's like, "Yeah, we use some of them for paperweights." I think that was my favorite part whatsoever, because they've been so important to the MCU, like so important.
Yeah.
And it's just like, no, it's nothing. And there's a moment where he's just standing there with the guy who doesn't know what a fish is, which is weird. And then he's like, "This is what like absolute power is," or like, "This is the most power," or something like that. And yeah, that is a great scene. There's this one actress in this show. I did not write her name down, but I talked about her a lot recently because she was in this horror movie called His House, which on the Lastercast channel, that's what we picked as our number one horror movie of 2020. Yeah, 2020. And then she was also on the show Lovecraft Country, which we covered on the Lastercast. But she is I think she's like Hunter B15.
One of the Minutemen?
She's like the main people. Like she's the one that puts the collar on him and beats him up, and then, and then he makes her kind of like like a loop at one point. Yeah. She was pretty good in this episode, but she's a really awesome actress in general.
Awesome. Yeah, I haven't seen that movie you mentioned, but I'll definitely look it up.
Yeah, it's on Netflix, and like if you watch that movie and you watch this, you'll be like, holy shit, that's the same actress. Like she's like totally different. What did you think of Owen Wilson in general as Mobius?
I think we've established here that we haven't read too many comics with the actual TVA in there. But I mean, I see the clear physical influence of the Mark Grunwald appearance. But other than that, he seemed like Owen Wilson. I mean, and I do like Owen Wilson. I've kind of missed Owen Wilson. There was something else I watched fairly recently that I can't remember what it was, but it was like with an actor that I used to love from when I was like a kid or a teenager, and they came back, and I was like, oh my God, I missed this so much. Maybe it was Jim Carrey in Sonic.
Okay.
I mean, I loved The Mask and Ace Ventura back in the day, and like to me, like his performance as Robotnik, was very reminiscent of that kind of craziness,
Right.
And I appreciated that. So I mean, Owen Wilson was a huge comedic actor in the late 2000s. What was he in? Like Shanghai Noon. I love those movies.
Wedding Crashers.
Wedding Crash. Oh my God, Wedding Crash. Yeah, and it's just he played himself sort of, but he's really good at it. So
yeah. And he's in a bunch of those Wes Anderson movies too. My wife is a big fan of those too. Yeah. No, he's great, and he's in Starsky and Hutch. I love Starsky and Hutch. I think it's kind of cheesy, but I love it. Do you think that he's playing a character that's going to be sort of more powerful than is letting on? Like he's sort of maybe like a more cosmic powered kind of character?
That is a great question. I'm not sure here. It's not really clear what the TVA can do outside of the little gadgets they have. Like, without that equipment, what are they capable of? We don't know.
Yeah.
It seems like he is kind of like in middle management in a sense, in this bureaucracy. So I don't know. I mean, and really his role in this is kind of up for grabs too. Not for grabs. I'm not really sure what it is.
Yeah, he kind of seems kind of reminiscent of like Tommy Lee Jones in Men in Black, and like Loki is like Will Smith. I mean, obviously they're not the same at all, but that dynamic of like the guy that knows everything and he knows how the system works, and the other guy who's like a fish out of water. They got that going on. Right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I could definitely see that, and more of a mentor figure as well.
Yeah. I was going to say that, what the hell was I going to say? The TVA itself, I hope that they kind of explain it and that they sort of make it not just seem ridiculous and absurd, because like, I like the idea that they can like kind of cleanse the timeline. Like they have almost like a grenade that seems like, that's like a reset. And then they call it pruning when they like erase somebody, right? Like when they erase a variant.
Yeah.
And so,
I mean, you know what? I'm kind of thinking that pruning and reset is really the same thing. That essentially that they are taking a timeline and destroying it. So they're actually killing everything in that timeline. So I think there's that kind of sinister aspect to it that they're going to probably maybe elaborate more on in the future.
Oh shit! Yeah, I didn't even think of that.
They're resetting it. Well, what does that mean? So there was a branch of time, and they don't want it to be there, so they're resetting it so it goes back, sort of. So whatever happened there doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah. Because they haven't shown what it does fully. Like the little grenade thing started to go off, and it started to spread.
And they jump through the little portal door, and you don't know what happens.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe that's the motivation for the other Loki. The other Loki is like, you're killing all these people, so I'm going to start fucking with you. I mean, and she seems to be. We're saying she is if we know it. We don't really know it, but I'm heavily assuming that she's collecting these reset grenade things as well, and that's an important thing we should have mentioned too.
Yes. No. Yeah, that's definitely part of the whole scheme. Is that like they show her picking, or him or her picking up the grenade at the end there. Yeah. So, like that makes a lot of sense. I didn't even think about that. Like the idea that they're just wiping out a whole friggin' timeline right there. That's crazy.
Yeah, we've established that there is no morality in this organization. It's there's one way this goes, and that's all they care about. They don't care if it's right or wrong. It's just that's the way it's supposed to go.
Yeah, really good point. So what is Kang's relationship to this then? Because he's not going to be in this, right? Because he's going to show up in Ant-Man Quantumania.
Yeah, he's supposed to show up there, but I mean, I'm kind of gonna be disappointed if he doesn't show up here. But at the same time, if he showed up here, you'd have to be like a major part of it. So
yeah,
I feel like I'm very excited for the show, but I'm definitely disappointed on two facts. That one, that Kang really won't be prominent, and that Thor won't be in it at all. I mean, I know we saw some footage of previous movies there, but it just seems so weird to not have him have an appearance, and I'm very confident that that's not going to happen.
Really?
Yeah.
Because they do that kind of shit with these MCU shows where they're like, oh, there's a rumor about episode 4. It's going to be this guy, but you're saying that he's not in it at all.
That's what I'm guessing. I'm saying that there's not going to. We are not going to get Chris Hemsworth in this show at all. Do anything new.
Okay.
Yeah, if they show some more footage, I can see that maybe some old footage. I don't think he's going to make any current appearances or anything like that in the show.
Yeah, I was actually kind of surprised that Rene Russo was in it because I think that scene where like Loki is brought back to Asgard and she says something to him. I mean, I don't think that's in Thor: The Dark World. I mean, I might be wrong though.
I think it was. I think that was footage. Yeah.
Okay.
But we should double check that for next time.
Yeah, there you go. Cool, man. Well, speaking of next time, do you have anything for this episode to cover left?
No, I covered all my talking points, I think.
Nice. Isn't it fucking nice to talk about something like this instead of Jupiter's Legacy?
Yes, it's so good. So I'm happier that I can talk about something that's interesting and that people might actually care about. And
yeah, people are actually excited about. Yes. Yeah, man. Cool. Well, we will be here. Brian and I will be here. We want some of those subscribers from the Anchorpete channel to come over here and join us on Comic Books Transformed. That's this new channel that's just about comic book stuff and Transformers. So if y'all haven't liked and subscribed, now's the time. And Brian, how many episodes of Loki are there altogether?
Just 6.
Just 6. Okay. Yeah. So we're going to be covering all 6 episodes here, and we're going to be doing them live on Wednesday nights at 9:30 Central Time. So if you guys, got nothing to do on a Wednesday night, come join us. All right. So Brian, it's good talking to you, man, and we'll see you next Wednesday.